Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. If you can hear us, please type yes into the chat box. Thank you for joining our learning series, Navigating New Roads. Today's webinar program, Understanding the Cyber Threat Landscape for Nonprofits, will be presented by Matthew Ferrante. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. Materials for today's presentation can be found in the toolbar located on the right hand of your screen. At the bottom of the toolbar, you will see a question box. All questions pertaining to the webinar content should be asked there. We will do our best to address them. Be sure to answer all of the polling questions to ensure that you receive CPE credits for today's session. Once the webinar is over, there will be a pop-up asking you to complete a survey of today's webinar. Please take a moment to complete it. It is our way of being able to provide you with the best and most relevant programs possible. And finally, to raise the stakes a bit, at the end of each of the sessions within our Navigating New Roads learning series, we will have a trivia question for you to answer. The attendee who answers the most trivia questions correctly at the end of the series will receive a special prize from our Withum team. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
All right, thank you for joining us today. My name is Matthew Ferrante. I'm the partner in charge of Withum Cyber Team. Today I'm presenting in conjunction with Michael Sipe, a former Navy fighter pilot, or as he likes to say, Navy aviator. Michael Sipe heads up our penetration, vulnerability, and threat emulation testing team. Also with us today is Manuel Capello, former U.S. military and senior penetration tester. At the end of the presentation, we will have an open floor for any questions, whether it's at a executive or director's level, technical, or for those who are non-technical, please feel free to ask any questions. If we do not get to your questions, please feel free to follow up with an email. For those of you joining us today, we offer a complimentary open source intel, dark web, and threat analysis report. I strongly encourage you all to take advantage of that opportunity. For some of you who already submitted, there's already very interesting findings that you'll be receiving in that confidential report. Okay, legal is always fun. Here's a quick disclaimer. Some of the materials we discuss may be active or historical cases. Please keep in mind, we are cybersecurity experts. We are not lawyers. Therefore, we do not give any legal advice. We provide security advice, assessment, and analysis. However, as necessary, we do support legal matters all the time as cybersecurity experts in support of lawyers and legal issues. So what are the objectives today? We're going to learn about the Withum Cyber Team and what we do, understanding the threat landscape for nonprofits, how a cyber threat actor can damage and even destroy your nonprofit, including valuable insights and lessons from the trenches. Know your enemy and vulnerabilities, very important. Knowledge is very important in order to thwart attacks. How to protect your nonprofits, cyber threat intelligence, and then of course, ask an expert at the end of this. This is me. I am actually smiling here. My family begs to differ, but I am smiling there. My background, I got a degree in applied sciences, criminal justice, U.S. Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy, graduated U.S. Secret School, electronic crime special agent program. I thought I'd be getting away from computers and technology once I went into the Secret Service because they're all the guys wearing the cool earpieces next to the limos. I did all of that too. But we're also the geeks with guns, so they put me right into the electronic crime squad, which is great. I also have training in U.S. critical infrastructure protection, presidential protection detail training. I was also assigned to President Clinton's detail, as well as the New York field office, where we help do protection stints on foreign dignitaries, everyone from Ahmadinejad, from Iran, Israeli prime ministers, and other high-level details as well. However, my passion was always cyber. And as far as geeks with guns, true, we are geeks with guns, but today's weapons, they're not predominantly used with lead or bullets. They're digital packets that are being used as weapons. So let's find out more how these things can create havoc, even physical damage, and even death as well. In summary, I love cyber protection and investigation, but my life is really the bits and bytes. All right, let's meet the team. These are the all-stars with experience stemming from offensive and defensive capabilities. We have experts from the private sector, nonprofits, United States Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, U.S. Central Command, U.S. Air Force systems, as well as other branches of the military. Our experts have provided services in over 71 plus countries and counting. Our clients range from global companies with enterprise class environments, small to medium enterprises, nonprofits, of course, pretty much anyone with data and infrastructure, whether local and or in the cloud. Our team's experience reflects some of the most notable achievements, working network intrusions such as the Sony network intrusions, Target retail chains data breach, Banner Health network intrusions, Operation Firewall, Operation Get Rich and Die Trying, and many more. Really, the secret sauce about any successful information security program is the interconnectivity between the people, process, technology, reputation, and of course the expertise. The secret sauce that was in the service was having people from distinct backgrounds, whether they're from accounting, legal profession, law enforcement, the private sector. That's what is some of the strong fabric that makes your information security programs successful. What we do, so we do IT managed services, security, incident response, forensics, and electronic discovery, threat intelligence. That's where your open source intel reports come. Threat emulation, and this is what the pen testers seem to love. That's where you have authorized hacking of environments, penetration testing, and vulnerability testing. If you're just getting a penetration test done, where they're just looking at open ports, say on the outer perimeter, you're really not doing justice for your information security program. Doing threat emulation, actually working as doing authorized hacking, is what more modern type of assessments are being done today and what should be done. In terms of these services, so one of the important things why we do all this across these different spectrums is we practice what we preach. We actually run infrastructure, so we do IT managed services. So it's one thing to say that this is what you should do in security wise, but again, we practice what we preach, which is very important. So incident response and cyber forensics. First of all, what is forensics? Forensics is applied science and technology for use in criminal, civil, and regulatory and fact-finding matters. It works on a repeatable process where either myself or a third party would be able to take our information and findings and be able to reproduce those results right down to a bit level. There's chain of custody records. There's ensuring evidence integrity is critical as well. This items listed to the right are the different type of cases that we work, and when you look at them, you're like, wow, this looks like something that you'd be working out of the United States Secret Service or on behalf of the feds. True, we did, but we also work these same things in the private sector. The only difference today is, I'm not going around with a gun on my hip. Maybe I'm going around with, a USB flash drive or another computer at my hip. But this is what gets the job done today, again, because it's about the bits and bytes. Some of the stuff here, you see is on the bottom right-hand side, you see a successful Russian organized crime intercept. This is, happened within minutes. We're able to infiltrate and get a $4.2 million check being brokered online that was stolen from a major financial institution. The watch in the upper right-hand corner. On the bottom of that was taken into, it comes out, there's a USB plug that comes out of the bottom. That was worn in a hedge fund company. It was used to plug into a computer and actually siphon data out of a computer. So criminals are using all different type of techniques. Those of you who are on the front line, the incident responders, we need to reply in kind. So you see some of the stuff like the microscope. We do stuff at a chip level. We're able to bypass a lot of encryption going directly down to a chip level. And we have very good success in bypassing it. And again, it's about that having that extraordinary team. utilizing pen testers or authorized hackers to sometimes bypass systems to get to the critical evidence that we need to address a lot of the cyber incidents. Okay, consider, we talked a little bit about forensics, but just remember a few things. Data is static, it's processing, and in transit. It's constantly moving, it's constantly changing, but sometimes it's stored on different devices. All these different devices are different devices that we've analyzed. I talked about doing stuff at a chip level. So if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, we call this a bake-off. That bottom left-hand corner is actually how we received the mobile phone to analyze. It was in pieces. The individual was involved in a vehicle accident. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. But the information on the mobile phone, whether he was on the phone or whether the other driver was on the phone, these devices needed to be needed surgery on them in order to get the data off, because obviously you can't just plug in a cord and get the data off. We're able to get 100% recovery, actually even more data than you would get by simply plugging in a USB and using software-based programs. We're analyzing everything from Xboxes to vehicles. Huge amount of information in vehicles. Every vehicle today that's produced, you get 3 IP addresses assigned to them. These are interconnected devices. The printers are often overlooked in an environment. We purchased a printer that was on resale from the Washington, D.C. area for kicks. We analyzed the hard drive that was in that computer, that was in that printer, and we found information from Lockheed Martin's F-35 Joint Strike Fighter on that. So be mindful of your printers, whether these printers are leased, whether they're printers that you purchased. These things contain computer drives. They store information on them. The destruction of that information is critical, and when they talk about system and data life cycles, it's end-to-end for every device that's interconnected on the network. USB flash drives, I can tell you, have wreaked havoc across organizations, and we're going to talk more about that. Incident response and forensic analysis of devices needs a strategy. I can't tell you how many times people just do things. This listing right here: strategy, identification, collection, preservation, processing, review, data recovery, reporting. What's GIGO? Those of you who are in technology should know this. We call it garbage in, garbage out, that if your input's flawed, your output is going to be guaranteed to be flawed as well. So it's very important that these type of phases are followed, and you have a strategy while you're addressing incident response and analyzing information. Understanding the threat landscape. Let's move on to that. Why nonprofits are at high risk of cyber intrusion. Complacency. This is always a big problem with law enforcement as well. You get complacent in your environment, you think all is well, you have groupthink, right? You want collective harmony, so therefore you think you're good. Third-party independent audits are critical. But nonprofits are at high risk of cyber intrusion, weak security, no cohesive strategy. I can't tell you how many times organizations would go in and they literally do not have a plan for what they're actually protecting. I would ask them some basic questions. What are you actually protecting? What is your confidential information? What is your organization's center of gravity? Meaning, what is it that if somebody attacked your environment, that they would literally knock your organization down to the floor? Those are the critical things, and those are the things that the directors, the board members are expecting, that IT and IT security suppliers are protecting that information. Limited IT security expertise, it's a hot market, and real expertise is rare, and it's difficult to find. Misaligned and or limited IT security budget. Just because you get a budget for IT or IT security doesn't mean that it's money well spent. Ensuring that for those of you that have a mature security infrastructure, you want ROI. What is the return on investment that you're getting for that IT security spend? You should be providing monthly metrics to say, hey, this is what we spent our money on. This is what we've been able to prevent, and this is what we can see that the change in the environment, that it's actually getting a positive return on that investment. Lack of independent modern security audits. I talk about this a little bit later, but I'm going to talk about it now. What do I mean by independent security audits? You should try and do threat emulation. See if someone could actually hack your environment. Have a third party have a third party go in and independently audit to see if they can actually infiltrate, steal data, what they can get. Another critical aspect of doing these assessments and the way we think about cybersecurity today, it's not just about what leaves the environment. There's other core things. It's called the CIA triad, which stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the system. Everyone's worried just about data loss, but it's about the integrity of your system. It's about the availability of your system. That's where the real impacts come in to play. High risk of cyber intrusion for nonprofits. What's the main reason? Economic gain, assets, and personal information. Your data has value. It's also important to understand that cyber threats and attacks are not always financially motivated. There are a lot of different reasons why cyber attacks occur. Hacktivism, you have radical groups, that may attack your organization for one reason or another. Vanity, revenge, outrage, and more. There's different reasons why people do their acts. I had the opportunity to interview some of the biggest, brightest hackers, and all of them were different. Some of them were strange, some of them were just plain evil, some of them were curious, but when you're dealing with the new online world, they're dealing with everyone across the board, and literally it could be, and I'll talk about this later, the type of threat actors that they're dealing with. Half the time they don't even know who they're brokering their information with. So if they steal information from you, they can be selling it on boards or through other channels on the dark web. And some of those channels, obviously, you have nation state actors, you have terrorist organizations who are on those different boards. This is where your information is. This is where your information is being brokered. Donor list and springboarding. What do I mean by springboarding? So they may hit your organization in order to get to donor list to attack the donors that are on there, or to harass the donors. So they may use your infrastructure in order to propagate and attack other entities or information obtained from that environment to attack those individuals as well. Breakdown in cybercrime economy and profits. Illicit online markets, 860 billion. Theft of intellectual property and trade secrets, 500 billion. Data trading, 160 billion. They are literally brokering your data. Your data has value. I can tell you a social security number goes online for $1,000 a social security number. Why? It has value. Cybercrime as a service. If you don't know how to do cybercrime, you can actually outsource that, and that's a $1.6 billion amount of economy and profits. Ransomware, still an emerging market, folks, 1 billion. So when I talk about online organized crime, these are people, their motivation is money. It may not always be money, but it's mostly money economically driven, but ransomware is still that emerging market. Here's some more cybersecurity stats and facts. So cybercrime economy and profits, 1.5 trillion. What are the cybercrime damages? 6 trillion by 2021. Ransomware attacks, they occur every 14 seconds now, every 11 seconds by 2021. What's the top country targeted? No surprise, the United States. Estimated records exposed from 2018 to 2023, 146 billion. I apologize, there's a dollar sign in front of there, but it's 146 billion records exposed between 2018 and 2023. What is the estimated cost per record exposed? $242 per record. Most people can't understand the data to paper equivalency, but consider how flash drives alone, how much information they can hold. How much is the data to paper equivalent of 1 gigabyte of data? And think about a terabyte of data, which is 1,024 gigabytes, what that would translate that into paper and how many records that would equate to. Consider how many records your organization has and do the math if you're impacted by a breach. What is the average cost of a data breach? $8 million. This keeps going up and up and up. There is some good news. The dark web cybercrime toolkit cost. So if you want to buy a dark web cybercrime toolkit cost, that cost has gone down. $1. That's what it costs for a cybercrime toolkit. Threat actors never waste a good opportunity to take advantage of the folks. These are criminals and some are terrorist actors. They do not have sympathy for your situation. Again, I know this firsthand. Working literally informants who were cyber crime actors, and also working, having experience with traditional organized crime. These same people work in the same way. So it's not just about they not only were brokering in stolen identities, credit card fraud, social security numbers, passports, they were also broken in for hits for hire, meaning to hire a hitman to actually kill other people. So these are real life criminals. These are the people who are dealing with these situations. So in the middle of a COVID-19, you had a Czech hospital that was taken down in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic, for an example, because of a hack that was done, a cyber attack that was done on their environment. They had to reroute critical surgeries and healthcare while the hospital was already being overwhelmed due to COVID-19. These delays and impacts led to the indirect loss of life. So if you look at the increase is just going up and up. Where it has here cyber attacks up 400%. It's actually the World Health Organization has it at more than that. It's 500%. So these attacks go up in the middle of a crisis. Whether it's COVID-19 or a digital denial of service attack, hackers often take advantage of an organization during peak times, organizational stretch to gauge in criminal activity. A lot of times during a situation, whether it's if you're in retail and it's a peak shopping season, that's when the attackers are going to hit. Same thing for nonprofits. If there's some type of drive that you all have going on, and it's kind of your time to maybe most of your donors would donate during this season, that's when the cyber criminals are often going to get hit. If that's when your organization is going to get hit. They also may hit you with the denial of service attack, where they keep bombarding your systems or overwhelming your systems or website. Be mindful, because that's usually a clear sign where they're looking to go through another backdoor to steal information while you're being distracted. Phishing and vishing. So phishing, if your organization and or users do not know what phishing is by now, please speed dial us right away after this webinar for immediate assistance. If you're experiencing an uptick in phishing attacks, we have solution for you as well. Training your users to be security experts is not the answer. It may help a bit, but AI or artificial intelligence used by criminals is making it more and more difficult for humans to detect phishing emails. Staff should be focusing on their work, not on their security. Effective security programs are transparent to the users. It shouldn't be in your face. Phishing, however, is the top security threat to businesses and nonprofit organizations. It's a fraudulent attempt to obtain sensitive information, such as usernames, passwords, and credit card details, by disguising oneself as a trustworthy entity in electronic communications. Phishing was involved in 32% of confirmed breaches, as well as 78% of cyber espionage incidents. 28% involved malware infections, and 29% involved the use of stolen credentials, both of which are frequently accomplished through phishing attacks. Phishing is the fraudulent practice of making phone calls or leaving voice messages purporting to be from reputable companies in order to induce individuals to reveal personal information. So it's very easy for someone to download one of these programs, plug in what number you want it to appear in the other person's phone, be able to call that person. There's also a way that if a person's doing presentations like mine, you can record their voice, put it into systems, and artificial intelligence will help you reproduce that person's voice in a phone call as well. So again, very, very sophisticated attacks. Remember, technology could be used for good. Technology could be used for bad as well. Cyber insurance. Cyber insurance can be a good thing, maybe. Often expectations, however, are misaligned. Just like an umbrella is great to have in a rainstorm, it might shield you from getting wet, but when you get struck by a bolt of lightning, it's another story. Same thing with cyber insurance. If you think insurance companies are in the business to simply pay out claims, you could be in for a very unpleasant awakening. Case in point, and just say what type of work we've done. We worked on defending companies. We worked on providing security assessments. We testified Southern Eastern District of New York. We've testified in foreign courts, but we also represent class action lawyers. We also represent insurers as well on these type of claims. So a case in point, we had a $2 billion claim on a major cyber impact, which brought down a global enterprise network for several weeks. Our job was to do due diligence on that incident on behalf of the insurers and what the underwriters underwrote the policy for. In the end, the enterprise filing the claim got less than $40 million. So that's $2 billion they put in for. They got less than $40 million, far less than their $2 billion. Why? The environment was not appropriately secured and maintained. We found that the environment was negligent and ran recklessly. Therefore, it was far less than they were expecting their insurance. So if your insurance policy is to make you whole, make sure that that policy, the way it's underwritten, is appropriately underwritten. In addition to that, a lot of times when you have cyber insurance, the insurers want to select their people to go in and assess the environment. So the question should be asked, who are they actually representing, those people who come in on the incident response? You or the insurer? Big difference. So accountability for executives, board members, and positions of trust. They're actually trying to criminalize this. Keep in mind that data flows very quick. You may have data from people, within the United States, people from overseas, but they want accountability. They want people to be held accountable. This includes board members and people who are in positions of trust. So this is getting worse and worse, these type of impacts. And unfortunately, at least my opinion, this is my personal opinion, a lot of the stuff that goes on, it's fixed on failure. That needs to change because the impacts keep getting greater and greater. I guess we're going to start with our first polling question.
Polling question number 1. What are the biggest challenges for your nonprofit? If you're having any sort of issues clicking off on an answer, just make sure that your screen is out of full screen mode. And we're going to close it out in just a second. Make sure to get in the vote so you can get your CPE. And we're closing. So it looks like 66% voted all of the above.
Okay, are we still waiting for the polling to complete, or should we continue?
I think we should continue on.
Okay, great. So you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, motivation of threat actors, impacts by cybersecurity incidents. So what is the motivation of threat actors? I have up here the Riddler because a lot of times you don't know what the different motivations are. But let's start with cybercrime by victim loss. You can see here, this is the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. IC3 has compiled all complaints registered in 2019. BEC/EAC, or business email compromise, email account compromise, leads the list. It's a sophisticated scam that targets organizations and individuals who perform legitimate transfer of fund requests. I can tell you right now, literally after this call, I have to deal with one of these on a new client. They wired out on multiple wires over $500,000 in wires. This is a big problem. It happens all the time. This is just one of many. A lot of these other incidents, they do not include lost business, time, wages, files, or equipment, or any other third-party remediation services acquired by the victim. So these are only what's been reported. Lastly, the number only represents what victims report to the FBI via IC3. It doesn't even represent what is reported to the Secret Service, other federal agencies. Even within the FBI, it doesn't account for victims' direct reporting to FBI field offices and agents. So this is much higher in terms of the losses. So what is let's enter the mindset of a threat actor. On the left, And you have Eastern European threat actors. To the right of that, you have nation state actors, Iran. Now, allegedly, the US and Israel hit Iran via the Stuxnet virus, took down their nuclear capabilities. What did Iran do in response? They ramped up their capabilities, their cyber capabilities and offensive capabilities. Russian threat actors, Bureau 121, North Koreans, and obviously you have the Chinese threat actors as well. I want to make another case in point that when you have these nation state actors, it's not purely nation state actors that would just act. There's a gray area between the organized crime criminals, these nation state actors, hacktivists, which are people who are actively hacking for a cause, cyber vandalism, and some people just don't need your money. They just want to literally see the world burn. You have other people who are just anarchists on the internet. Terrorist threat actors. So this is a London-based bus bombing. I actually designed the first computer network wiretap ever done in the United States. Information obtained from that wiretap was actually picked up on some of the terrorist activity. That evidence was also used for the people who orchestrated this London bus bombing. So when your information gets, if they're utilizing your network to orchestrate attacks, it's not just about pilfering yours. They may be using your network to orchestrate attacks. That's where the proxying comes in. Or they may be jumping off of your network to orchestrate other type of activities to attack other infrastructure. So be mindful. They're very, very smart and sophisticated on how to gain everything from your network. If you got hit with a ransomware attack, it doesn't mean that their goal was just ransomware. That may have been one of the goals, but often they keep hooks in the system long after the ransomware is gone from the environment. Internal threats. These have been some of the biggest impacts that I've seen on organizations. So we have two IT admins, a coder. The IT admin to the left, that's Roger Duronio. I did the search warrant on his house during going some time back. But this was an IT administrator making about $125,000 a year. He didn't like his year-end bonus of $25,000, put in a what's called a logic bomb, where when certain conditions were met, the logic bomb would go off and the entire infrastructure would go down. He didn't stop there because, again, he wasn't happy with this bonus. He put in puts betting that the company's stock would go down. When the factors hit, he left the organization. Logic bomb went off, thousands of systems went down. He actually profited from some of the puts. The IT admin in the middle, that's Albert Gonzalez. And above that is his resume. He worked as an IT administrator in a lot of different places. Extremely bright individual, but he was the godfather of carding. He did compromise NASA. He compromised over 175 million credit cards. I worked him as an informant. When no one actually gets a clean slate, meaning that you're not going to, if you have initial charges, usually in the federal system, you will get maybe a reduced sentence. He actually got a clean slate for a lot of the work he did. However, he was lulled back into his criminal enterprise, started working it again, and engaging with other co-conspirators like the coder to the right from Wall Street. These are all people working in internal environments. The resume that was found above, I was in the private sector. And sometimes you just develop what's called a sixth sense, where I just felt something was off. And this is a major global institution, ran indicators in the system, found this resume sitting on a desktop in New Jersey. It was Albert Gonzalez's resume. It was to a firewall administrator where he's trying to recruit himself into the financial institution. So these three threat actors, if they can't get you from the outside, they may get you from the inside. You have to protect your environment, both from the outside as well as on the underbelly, and your people are critical and part of that. The coder to the right, he just did it as a friend to his buddy Albert, where he was actually drafting and writing code called blah blah, where it would steal and capture all types of information from organizations. The left, or the bottom left, I already talked about USB plugs. To the right, keyloggers. We've had hedge fund companies and even other organizations, including nonprofits, where people have utilized keyloggers, plugged them into machines, or installed software to actually capture all of your keystrokes. An insider engaged in that, and that was an IT admin who engaged in that. Center middle is actually a statement from a penetration tester. And this is for a major global financial institution. And you ask, well, they have backups, business continuity, but could they bring a global financial institution down if it's not secured the right way? Absolutely. Those of you in the know that sometimes you bring networks down, they don't easily come back up. Nonprofits related to cyber attacks, you guys aren't exempt. Hackers are hard at work attacking vulnerable organizations like nonprofits. Here are some examples. One contractor serving the Greater Morristown nonprofit, cyber thieves demanded a $500,000 ransom. The interesting thing about this, it's not just about your nonprofit, but who supplies some of the services to it. So they're a target. So these IT managed service providers who just purely understand IT managed services are a big risk. By the way, they have the keys to your kingdom. So they're the ones who, often have domain admin credentials, or they have a way into your environment. Be mindful of that. Some of the largest data breaches are from these third-party suppliers, even getting through the HVAC system in order to get into some of these larger enterprises. Reagan Foundation, they found that they're getting 2,400 cyber attacks annually. They were seeking donations to just thwart those attacks. Nonprofit Times, they got hit with a significant ransomware attack on March 24th. Kansas University, hackers breached the official email account and investment executives of Kansas. Hitting the executives or hitting people up at the director or boards level are very, very big. They know that they have a lot of the information. Your information's out there. It's just about being smart enough and able to grab that information on who these different execs are or board members, and attacking that information. I can tell you right now, from the open source intel reports that we receive, we see a lot of the high level people who have their accounts being brokered on the dark web. So again, strongly suggest you do those open source intel reports. Some of this stuff is going to come up. People Inc., they're a nonprofit human service company where significant PII data was exposed, including names, social security numbers, medical information, financial data, government identities, and much more. Now, they said they have no evidence indicating that any information aside from the 2 email accounts were impacted in connection with this incident. You have to think, 2 email accounts, just think of how much. I can tell you I have thousands of emails, thousands. I mean, my email account, how much information is just in your email account alone? So 2 email accounts, that even if 1 email account is compromised, is a massive amount of information. Remember, $242 per record. Those email accounts are often used as a nexus into the rest of the wider environment. So just because it's 2 email accounts, it's not it's not a big deal. It's still a big deal. Next, how do we destroy a nonprofit via cyber attacks? Can you actually destroy a nonprofit? So we thought about that, tossed it around the team. We looked at ways that it can be done. We know it can be done. So let's talk about one of the ways right now, digital denial of service attacks. So if you're getting your donations online, or even your infrastructure is on premises or in the cloud. By the way, what does cloud mean? Cloud just means somebody else's computer. Just because it's sitting in Amazon or in Microsoft's environment, yeah, Amazon's secure, Microsoft is secure. That doesn't mean you're not. That doesn't mean that you're secure. So big difference between what's Amazon, Microsoft, and your environment. Even if your cloud environment sits there, you still have a responsibility. It's just literally that it's like a physical computer sitting someplace else. So these digital denial of service attacks, this is a tool called the low orbit ion cannon. Pen test team, you'll notice it's version 1.04. It's very easy. You put in the URL or IP address. Maybe if we were to look right now at, let's say, a competitor, plug it in. No, I'm not going to do this. Charge the laser, you hit it, it'll bring those sites down. It'll attack their infrastructure or different ways for access. So let's say you have a VPN line, you know what that IP address is, you want to hit that, you can use these type of things to attack that type of infrastructure. Of course, these type of tools, they're free, readily available, or maybe you got to spend that $1 that I mentioned before for those different toolkits. Well, now you got upgrades. Now you got the high orbit ion cannon. I love the humor. That's not a typo. Fire the laser. They like to have humor in it. But these things are very effective. We've tested them. They do work. And obviously, there's more sophisticated tools to cause denial of service attacks. I can tell you, for the larger organizations, having a denial of service attack repeatedly and then having ways to mitigate that can be very costly. You need to think about these things before the impacts happen. Non-profit destruction. We talk about misinformation or information warfare. This is a big thing. Cyborgs, trolls, and bots can fill the internet with lies and half-truths that can rapidly impact your nonprofit into chaos and destruction. As the 2016 election showed, social media is increasingly used to amplify false claims and divide Americans over hot-button issues. Now, there's a difference between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is defined as any false information, regardless of intent, including honest mistakes or misunderstanding of facts. Disinformation, on the other hand, typically refers to misinformation created and spread intentionally as a way to confuse or mislead. Research indicates that false claims spread more easily than accurate ones, likely because they are crafted to grab attention. Misleading stories travel 6 times faster and reach more people. Information warfare is effective. If it wasn't effective, nation-state actors wouldn't engage in it. As you see with our national election, information warfare is being used by foreign actors all the time. The same tactic has been adopted by cyber threat actors as well. And it doesn't have to be a collective online organized group. Sock puppet accounts are fictitious accounts or online accounts created for the purpose of deception. The risks were highlighted during 2016 Russian troll farms. They create accounts to spread and amplify social media posts about controversial issues. These are these sock puppet accounts. That's called the in Russia. That's called the Russian web brigades. I've worked in Moscow. I've worked in mainland China. I've worked in these different regions. These people are very, very sophisticated, very, very well thought out on how to impact that. What the difference I see between the United States and a lot of the others, we have rules, we have borders. When you're dealing with online organized crime or you're dealing with other nation state actors, they have different laws. They have different ways of doing it, as well as do we engage in these type of campaigns? We do. We do engage in these type of campaigns for intelligence reasons, but we see a lot of the other ones a lot more aggressive that are coming from nation state actors like North Korea, Iran, internet trolls. I want to talk about that real quick. Those are individuals who thrive to create emotional chaos and to provide others sometimes for their own amusement and sometimes as part of a coordinated campaign. Bots in social media context are anonymous programs which can run accounts to spread content without human involvement. Some resemble actual users, so they are hard to spot. The Pew Research Center concluded in a 2018 study that accounts suspected of being bots are responsible for as many as 2/3 of all tweets. That's significant and that's amazing. What are cyborgs? Those are hybrid accounts. They're part human, part bot. Cyborg accounts are those in which humans periodically take over the bot accounts to respond to other users and to post original content. The problem with cyborgs is that they're much harder to catch and detect. So deep fakes are also being utilized. Those are videos that have been digitally created with artificial intelligence, machine learning to make it appear like something happened, but it did not. They're seen as an emerging threat, and improvements in video editing software make it possible for tricksters to increase realistic footage. What is the solution here? How do you fix this? This is very difficult, and this is a very, very real problem. And I do see it as an information security problem because a lot of times they're hacking into the system, grabbing information, and then modifying that. Secret Service, you know, we worked in counterfeiting, but it wasn't just about authenticating genuine bills or genuine notes from counterfeit ones. It was also document. Now it's electronic information as well. How do you authenticate that type of information? And forensics is utilized in authentication of electronic information. So what is the solution here? Education. Nonprofits need to protect their confidential information as well to avoid tampering and leaks from internal and external threat actors. But staying ahead of misinformation with an appropriate public relations strategy, especially in relation to reputational impacts. Nonprofit destruction, injection attacks. So there's SQL type of injections where they actually inject data into the databases. I'm going to look at it more from a macro approach, but most injections, an attacker supplies an untrusted input into a program or a system. The input gets processed by the interpreter as part of a command or query. This attack type is considered a major problem in web security. But it's not just web security. What I want to talk about is injection attacks, meaning that it can come from USB devices. These things, again, it took down, if you think that USB devices don't cause impacts, ask Iran what happened via the Stuxnet virus. It was a USB that was plugged into their nuclear facility, took down their centrifuges, and actually caused physical damage. These things can come from the web, these injections, by clicking on the wrong items. Consider the malware may be injected because someone clicked on a link, it takes them out to another site, then the injections pulled down from the internet, causes issues with your databases and systems. And what I'm seeing is that the backups, if you don't have what's called smart backups, you got problems. If you're doing traditional backups, where it just backups anything that's on your system, and you say, okay, I'm rotating it every 3 months or every or 6 months of backups being kept. If they're not smart backups where they're detecting ransomware and self-healing, then you got a problem with your backups and your business continuity. You really need to look at a solution that integrates AI, detects these ransomwares being poisoned into backups. Because think about it, if your backups worked, you would just roll your backups back if you're hit with ransomware. So be mindful, not just what's leaving your environment, but what is coming into your environment as well. When I talk about hackers being vicious, we've actually seen hackers implant information, false information into organizations as well. Sometimes even child exploitation as well in order to cause impacts on an environment. This is real stuff we had, and this isn't a one-off incident. We've seen it happen at a minimum 3 times in the US Secret Service and twice in the private sector, where somebody actually injected child pornography into a system in order to frame an individual or the organization. So you have to be mindful what's going around. Data is not centralized, it's scattered all over the place. You have a mobile device, there's a tremendous amount of information. It's constantly transmitting even when you're not inputting something into your system. Bricking. What is bricking? It's when an electronic device becomes unstable, often from a failed software or firmware update. Bricking devices means that you cannot just roll a backup back. So we used to do this kind of with some of the old firewalls or routers. We do half of a firmware or inject malicious code into it, stop it in while it was doing the firmware update, and now the device basically is hosed. It becomes problematic. Again, even though there's what's called checksums, where you can actually check or validate that the information is good that's being uploaded, there's ways, if you're not updating your firmware, you're not taking care of your systems, bricking device becomes physically like a brick. You will not be able to use it and run your backups back to those systems. I put in here regulatory violations and legal sanctions. Think internal compliance, data privacy violations, GDPR, CCPA, New York Shield. Data privacy is coming to you. If you lose your data, now you're going to have real damages because they're going to be able to equate, you lost X amount of records, these are your violations, this is what you're going to be paying the states. Even if you are not in California, for CCPA, if you have any California residents, and for New York Shield, New York residents, even though you're not in New York, or if you're not in New York or not in California and you have their data, you're still, it's still applicable. Same thing with Europeans, any GDPR data may be applicable as well. So data privacy is big. You need to think of it almost like PCI, payment card information, like credit card data. That's what your PII data is today. So nonprofit destruction, what I often see is complacency, false sense of security, rubber stamp in the environment. Don't do check the box security. That's where you just kind of go through, check, or think that it's not going to happen to you. Yes, you. I can't tell you how many times people think that, they said, oh, well, I did this type of assessment. We do it our annual pen test assessment. Really, you need to step it up. Do the threat emulation where you actually have people attempt to hack the environment. Lack of accountability. Accountability is not a bad thing. Accountability is a good thing. Someone should be accountable for the security of your organization. There needs to be, someone has to wear that button and say you're accountable for this, or the team. But somebody has to have that. And then fix on failure. Big mistake, because when you fix on failure, the cost of those impacts are much higher, and then you wish you invested in your infrastructure, or your technology, or your people. Next generation cyber attacks. We're on the dawn of kinetic cyber. This is here already. So what is a cyber kinetic attack? It's the ability to cause direct or indirect physical damage. Connecting physical objects and processes to the cyber world offers us capabilities that exponentially exceed the expectations of us, right? They're doing a lot more for us, but the risks are exponential as well. Cyberkinetic attacks have been so far validated experimentally in labs, used operationally in espionage and sabotage, used criminally in attacks throughout the world. So can it cause death, injury? Absolutely it can. Let's look at the next slide. IoT, or Internet of Things, is a system of computing devices, medical and digital machines, transferring data over the network without requiring human-to-human or human-to-computer interaction. So attacks on IoT devices have already caused physical damage inflicted on nuclear power plants, water facilities, oil pipelines, factories, hospitals, transit systems, and apartment structures that utilize IoT devices to control them. We've seen computer hack and the ability to computer hack an insulin pump, airplanes hacked via the entertainment system. Now, why would anyone put an entertainment system on an airplane interconnected with some of the additional critical systems of an airplane? I have no idea. Obviously, the infrastructure was designed poorly, and IT security took a back seat to the actual IT designs. So putting IT security in the forefront and baked in when these things are being developed is critical. Vehicles being hacked. Every new vehicle has 3 IP addresses assigned to it. So vehicles, everything's interconnected. Pacemakers being hacked as well. So while these devices are being put in, I can tell you IoT devices are going to be one of the weakest areas because the security is last. Next, so here's an example. I mentioned I did Secret Service. Doctors disabled the wireless in Dick Cheney's pacemaker to thwart hacking. So if it wasn't a real risk, believe me, they would have said, hey, no need to unplug it. So obviously these are very, very realistic risks that are going on with these devices. Let's start with our second polling question.
Polling question number 2. Do you feel that your organization currently has adequate resources? Yes, no, not sure, or not applicable? All right, and we're gonna close out the poll in just 2 seconds. So get in those last answers. And we're closing it out. All right, Matt.
All right, starting up. Okay, so how to protect a nonprofit from cyber attacks. Knowledge is not, we want to start with knowledge. So these open source intel reports, that's what OS and IT, is very, very helpful. Get the threat intelligence reports, think out of the box, get a third party to look at, to tell you what's being brokered on the dark web. This is what we do. Also the outer perimeter scans, what's happening on your outer perimeter, what can we see? Just like, I'm not an accountant, but just like an accountant, if they hand their work to, they don't check their own work, they hand it to another accountant, they check that work and they say, well, is these financial metrics accurate? Same thing, these open source intel reports provide that. They provide third-party metrics, publicly available information to see what's being brokered on the web, whether accounts are being compromised, whether your outer perimeter is secure or not. Knowledge by itself is not power. It's the application of knowledge that's power. How do you protect your nonprofits? Threat emulations, I mentioned that. VCSO or VCCO analysis of security control framework. What does that mean? Virtual Chief Compliance Officer, Virtual Chief Compliance Officer or Virtual Chief Information Security Officer. Have them look at that. We offer, for example, VCSO services. We'll look at your security control framework. What security controls do you have in place? It's about applying the appropriate mixes. Maybe you're not using that technology the right way. So your nonprofit may have invested in technology, but it's not being applied the right way. New York Times, for example, had DLP, data loss prevention. They had a very good one, but it wasn't actually configured the right way, and they were breached because that was not configured the right way. Business continuity and backup assurance. Business continuity, real business continuity. By doing the threat emulation assessments, they can actually see, can it affect your confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the systems? Do you have those smart backups? Are your backups effective? I can tell you that during an incident, and they have independent stats, 75% of backups fail during a critical incident, meaning that's why if an organization is completely paralyzed and they're paying the ransom, shame on them, they didn't have appropriate business continuity and their backups were not validated, or they didn't have those smart backups to mitigate those type of risks. Incident response exercises, important. Go through different incident response exercises. What if this happens? What if that happens? And then go through your processes and controls. This is normally done through a third party in conjunction with your IT. Trust but verify. We've had other stuff where we've identified, for those of you techies out there, LLMNR traffic. IT said, yeah, they took care of it. Pen testers went back, validated the environment, said, no, it's not taken care of. And then the IT director was really upset because today I thought my guys took care of this. He was upset at his people, but they didn't. It was a mistake. So they're working with them, obviously, to mitigate those type of risks, because that's a big risk to the organization. To the right, I have a picture of the ark. I always say this: when did Noah build the ark? Before it rained, not after. This is when you should be doing this stuff, not after an impact happens. Often when impact happens, companies and nonprofits go out shopping to spend money to fix it. Just because you go out shopping doesn't mean you spend the money on the right things. Be smart and spend your money wisely so you get your appropriate return on investment. Security measures for nonprofits. I'm not going to obviously go through all of these. Secure workstations, physical security. You cannot have physical security without electronic security. You can't have electronic security without physical security. Both go hand in hand. Performing those audits, we definitely talked about that. Backing up data, but testing those backups. Most backups should be on-site, off-site. By the way, if you're just backing up to the cloud, think about this. You got to get your data back from the cloud. And we've seen a lot of times when that data is needed, it's a problem getting that data back down from the cloud. So be mindful of that. If you're just in the cloud, you know, what's the cloud? It's this mystical thing. Again, it's someone else's computer, but you got to get it down from that pipe, and that's been problematic. Controlling access to the data, knowing where your confidential data resides, how it's being used and maintained, whether it's leaking from the environment, aligning regulatory requirements like data privacy specifically to those controls, and then validating those controls. Your assessment shouldn't be just be, hey, you're vulnerable here. Your assessment should be, we validated this control. It aligns to this specific regulatory requirement. Teleconferencing, big. Remote home from work. I can tell you that they did an independent study of remote workers. 57% of employees said that they felt they can do something nefarious against their organization and not get caught because they're working from home. So this is, an independent study. Teleconferencing, be aware of your teleconferencing. There needs to be security controls applied to that. Again, just because whether you're using Teams, whether you're using Zoom, having those appropriate controls applied to those meetings and setting a framework for it is important. There are ways to actually certify that your organization is doing that and applying those controls. If not, and data is leaked because of this, I've told you we worked on class action lawsuits. Class action lawyers come to us and say, what did they wrong? Show me where they were negligent. Show me where they were reckless with this, and they didn't do proper care for the environment. So these type of things are critical to have done. Next polling questions.
Polling question 3. What do you feel is your organization's biggest security risk? Employees, vendors, IT infrastructure, or other? All right, and we're going to close it out. And it looks like the most people voted for IT infrastructure. And it's back to you, Matt.
Great. Okay, how to protect your nonprofits. Obviously, I believe we're handing out the deck after this. Human error, still one of the #1 causes. Move your infrastructure more towards automation, AI integration. AI integration, yes, you want to look for more of that. Licensing applications, whether you're using Microsoft, applying the appropriate licenses and tweaking AI for your environment. Do you really want to train your people how to be security experts? I mean, regular employees, how to identify phishing? No, let AI take care of this. I will tell you, the criminals, they adopt stuff better. They're using AI to orchestrate attacks. And again, a lot of this has to do with formulating a plan. Have a plan and a strategy in place and adopt a security control framework, whether it's NIST, PCI, ISO type framework. If you have more questions about that, feel free to email us after about this. Also, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Having a comprehensive strategy in play for when impacts happen is going to be critical. but there's sometimes bad things happen, and expect the unexpected. Look, I'm a 9/11 survivor. I helped, I worked at 7 World Trade, and I was a first responder. I came out of the elevator with my Starbucks coffee, and all of a sudden the whole building rocked. I had no idea. I would never expect that. They didn't train us for that, but you have to expect the unexpected for your environment, because I can tell you bad things will happen when you least expect it. We worked on thousands of different network intrusions. I've worked on terrorist, JTTF, Joint Terrorist Task Force. We worked on a lot of different impacts. I can tell you what is consistent across all of them. They always happen when you least expect it. Last but not least, I'm a Star Wars fan. Fake security is the path to the dark side. False security leads to suffering. So we take a lesson from Yoda. Do or do not, there is no try. So let's get to our last polling question.
Last polling question. Has your nonprofit conducted an adversary emulation security assessment? Yes or no? All right, get in those last votes. We're going to close it out in 2 seconds. And we're closed. Back to you, Matt.
Great, and that concludes today's webinar. If anyone has any questions, I'd like to open up to the floor. If anyone has any questions, technical or otherwise, be happy to answer that.
While you guys are typing in your questions, I'm also going to launch our trivia question. Feel free to answer it for a chance to win a prize. All right, and the trivia question is all closed up. Any other questions? All right, well, that looks like it's it. If anybody has any further questions, you can reach out to any of the presenters today, or Matt today, and we will be in contact with you if you have reached out for a report. And other than that, have a nice day, everybody.